Welcome. So officially, welcome to our first Python PLD discussion. And in today's session, we are looking at introduction to Python. And in fact, I want the session to be such that even if someone who hasn't programmed before, hasn't written a single line of code before, comes to watch this session, they should be able to appreciate what programming is, what Python is, and how to even program in Python. So we are going to start from the very beginning. And by saying we are starting from the very beginning, I think the very first thing we should talk about is what is a programming language? All right. When we say programming language, what at all is it? Is it any different from the languages that we know? You and I speak languages. I'm speaking English right now, and that is why you are able to understand me. And by being able to speak a language, I'm able to give you instructions for you to follow. So that is for the human language. But then our computers, we need to be able to communicate with our computers. Imagine every single day you sit behind your computer and your mobile devices, you give it instructions and it obeys. So when you want to call somebody, you do something, click on something, and something happens. Ask yourself what happens behind the scene, like what is actually responsible for all those actions, the instructions that you give to your computer, how is it able to even obey it? So the truth here is that there is what we call a programming language, which computer programmers or engineers use to write programs, all right? And these programs help us to use our computers meaningfully. So when we talk about programming languages, I've talked about human languages. That's what we already know. There is also what we refer to as machine language, and that is what a computer understands. So the computer has its own language that it understands, but unfortunately, the language that the computer understands, we humans struggle to understand it. And the computer also struggles to understand our language. So on two sides, we have what we call the machine language, then we have the human language, machine language and human language. Unfortunately, this is for our computers, and this is for us humans. And there is no correlation between these two. Humans do not understand computers' language. Computers do not understand human language. So how then do humans interact with computers? And how then do computers also interact with humans in a way? And because of this difficulty, it brought about what we call programming languages, which is kind of the intermediary between human languages and computer languages, okay? So essentially what programming languages are is it helps humans to communicate to computers. So what actually happens is that these programming languages are in a particular way that humans understand it. And we've developed something to be able to convert these programming languages back into machine languages. Once you have written something in a programming language which you understand and you've given it to the computer, and we have a software that helps us convert that programming language into a machine language. Now, the computer understands exactly what you were telling it. It's like, as you have joined this session, assuming I was speaking a language that you didn't understand, the two of us have agreed that your language that you speak, I don't understand. My language that I speak, you also don't understand. So what can we do? We can bring a third person in here, and that third person becomes sort of an interpreter or a mediator. In our case, we have programming language doing that mediation. However, programming languages are not things that the computers understand. So we still have to get something or software to convert the programming language to machine language. So with regards to the programming languages, we classify these programming languages into two major types. We have what we call the low level programming languages, and we have the high level programming languages. What do this mean? So you realize that there are two sides of the pattern here. We have the computer, we have the human. Okay, so H for human, C for computer. Then we have programming languages in here. Okay, so PL for programming languages. The programming languages that are so close to, okay, this is machine language, then this is human language. The programming languages that are so close to the machine languages are known to be low level. Then the programming languages that are close to that of the human languages are known as high level languages. There are some languages that may be considered as intermediary, so you may end up finding middle level languages, but let our focus be on high level and low level. So low level is so close to the machine language, even though it is not machine language. Then high level is closer to our human language. So it makes programming in high level languages way easier than programming in low level languages. With that said, we also understood that even though these languages, whether low level or high level, are programming languages, they still need to be converted into what the computer will understand. They need to be converted into machine languages. So how do we do that? As I gave an example, but then there are two major ways that we can do that. As I gave an example, if I speak a language that you don't understand, you need someone to translate what I say to you. But there are two ways that we can do that. You can wait and let me finish saying everything that I say in this video. And after I'm done, let somebody translate the whole thing. Do you get it? We wait for the whole. If it is a letter, for instance, we let a person write the whole letter, then you pick the whole letter and give it to the translator to translate everything for you. So that is one of the ways where you wait for everything to translate, or copy everything, go and paste in Google Translate, and it's going to translate everything for you. On the other hand, we have the situation where after each sentence that I make, we make an interpreter interpret that sentence. Pay attention to my choice of words. Initially, I said, you can wait for me to finish everything, or let me write a letter, then I'll give it to a translator to translate the whole letter for you, or the whole video content for you. So that is one way. The other way is for me to get an interpreter, and everything that I say per statement, the interpreter is going to interpret it for us. So when it comes to converting programming languages to machine languages, there are two ways that we do it. We can have what we call a translator, or in programming terms, we call it a compiler. Then we can have an interpreter. So compilation and interpretation, and it is simple. With compilation, you have to wait for everything to finish. You write the whole letter, or let me finish the whole video, then you compile. That means you translate everything in there into machine code before we go and execute it. But when we are dealing with interpreters, every single statement that I make, once you realize that I'm done with that statement, go and interpret it. So those are two ways that we can go about it. With those of us who have already done C programming, you would have heard about level programming, because C is a low level programming language, and C uses a compiler. So basically what it means is that for C, you need to write the whole code that you are going to write, then go and translate everything into machine language. But for the Python language, which happens to be an interpreter, Python, a high-level language, uses what we call the interpreter. And basically what it means is that every line of Python code will be interpreted before the other. Okay, this doesn't mean, the illustration on your screen right now doesn't mean that all low-level languages follow compilation and all high-level follow interpretation. No, I make specific examples, C and Python. Those are the examples I'm using. So there are some languages that are compiled, and there are others that are interpreted. So if you hear that Python is an interpreted language, this is where it is coming from. Okay, so every single line will be interpreted. We don't need to wait for the whole thing to compile. Even though technically there is some form of compilation in Python, but then let's leave it there and be rest assured that Python is an interpreted language, while C, as we know, is a compiled language. And hopefully you understand these two terms as I've used them per the illustrations. Okay, so now let's welcome ourselves to Python programming. Python programming. Basically, Python is just one of those programming languages, as I've already mentioned, and it's a higher programming language. What that a higher level programming language? What that means is that it's closer to our human language. It makes it so easy. In fact, Python is like one of the easiest languages that you can come across. So if you haven't ever written code before, and you see Python code, if only you understand English, you are likely to make sense out of that code. That is how easy it is. So the question that a lot of people ask is, why is Python so popular? Why is it so popular? The major reason why it's so popular is because of the ease of use. Like, it's easy to write code in Python. It saves time to write code in Python. A lot of companies out there use Python. Therefore, by learning Python programming, you can get to work in almost any of the big companies. Most of the big companies, Netflix and co, use Python. Most of them use Python. Then the reality is that even those companies that do not use Python as their primary language, they use Python as a supporting language. So at the end of the day, by learning Python, you are learning a language that is in demand, if I should put it. I read a survey. In fact, I've written an article. I've written an article on techparty.com. I wrote it earlier this year. I hope I can find it. It's on how to teach yourself Python programming. And when I was writing that article, I did a research on Python, and I realized that in 2021, Statista reported that Python is like I think it was the third. Let me quickly try and find this. Go to all articles. So for those of you who do not know, this is a blog that I managed. It's been a while since I published content there, but I write on tech-related stuff on this blog. Okay, so how to teach yourself Python. I think it should be where. Anyway, so I was just going to show you the information in there, but I'll share the link in the Telegram group and on YouTube as well, so that you can always have access to it. But the point I was making there was that from the research I did, it was like the third most used language in 2021. And we are not far away from 2021. This is 2022. In fact, other resources or reference materials put it like on second. Even some of them put it to be first, like the most in demand. Others put it second, third. But whatever be the start, you should realize that learning Python is not a waste of time at all. Then, apart from the ease of use, Python 2 is general purpose. So let me talk about general purpose, which is very important. Ease of use. Then general purpose. When we started learning C, a lot of people started complaining, why are we learning C? What can we do with it? But then when you take Python, you can do almost anything at all that you think. Almost anything at all that you think about doing, you can do it in Python. So if it is web development that you want to do, you can do it with Python. If it is game development, you can do it with Python. Whatever you are thinking of, machine learning, all the science-related things, data analysis and code, you can do them with Python. So Python is not a specific language. I mean, it's not used for just one thing that, hey, if you learn Python, it's only this you can do it. In fact, almost everything you can do it Python. So whichever angle in software engineering you want to go, automation, machine learning, any of them, you can do it with Python. Therefore, learning it is not a wrong choice at all. Python has a massive community, a very supportive community. Why is this important? Because at the end of the day, you and I do not know it all. We need the support of the community to build various projects that we want to build. This means that when you are start building your project, when you need help doing something, where will you look for support? There's a lot of communities out there that supports Python. You get information. And in fact, when you talk about the various libraries and models, there are a lot of them, lots of libraries. People are willing to write Python codes and share them with you so that you just use them as when you need to use them. So by choosing to learn Python, you have actually chosen a great language. And I even believe that comparatively, it is like the most friendly for beginners. If you've never learned programming before, Python should be the language of choice. Now, I believe that almost everyone on this call has a reason for learning Python. I wouldn't want to spend all the time explaining all of these things, but let me mention the key things I need you to take from about Python in itself. So when you take each programming language, there is what we call a programming paradigm that the language follows. Okay, some of these paradigms that you may come across are what we call functional programming, where you are dealing with more of functions. Okay, we have what we call procedural programming. We have what we call object-oriented programming. So object-oriented programming. And most languages, when you talk about them, they will tell you whether it is procedural, whether it's functional or object-oriented. And if you have read anything at all, at least Code 7 members have read things about Python, you would have come across the fact that Python is object-oriented programming language. But the interesting thing about Python is that it is multi-paradigm. So Python belongs to both functional, procedure. Did I say both? It belongs to functional, procedural, object-oriented. So whichever model that you use to write your programs, when you choose Python, you can do it. If you are more of the functional oriented programmer, you are going to be able to do that with Python. If you are more of the procedural, you are going to be able to do it with Python. Then object-oriented, which is like a big deal, big deal, and in fact, we will learn it soon, is also you are going to be able to do it with Python. All right. So now, let's get started with Python itself. If I want to, after hearing all of these things and I'm interested in learning Python or programming in Python, how do I go about it? That is the first question. How do I get to write Python code? So basically, we are looking at the tools that we can use to program in Python. The very first thing that I will recommend is for you to install Python on your computer, especially if you are using a Windows machine or even a Mac. You should also have it installed. Most people with Linux may have Python installed already, so but then you'd have to confirm that it is installed on your computer before anything. So how do I get to install Python on my computer? It's simple. Python is actually open source, so you get it for free. It's available out there. And after you've learned C programming, if you want, you can go and contribute to the Python itself because it is open source. But then to get Python, go to python.org. Python.org. So the URL that I went to is python.org. Okay. And once you come here, go to downloads. With downloads, automatically your system will detect the operating system that you are on and give you the latest version that is available. So as you can see here, 3.10.7. So there are two major versions of Python available right now. We have the 3.x and the 2.x. That's 3 point something or 2 point something. So the 2.7 is like the stable version of Python 2 that is available. But then Now almost everything, like they've stopped supporting 2.7 or 2. So you don't want to go back to Python 2. So stick to Python 3 point something, at least 3.7 and above. Stick to 3.7 and above. So basically you can download the latest version here. Then after downloading it, you're just going to install it. Double click on it, install. Simple. But make sure I've already installed it, so I don't want to go through the process. When you are installing, there is a prompt that you need to check. That is to add to your environment, is it the path environment variable or something? There's a prompt like that you need to check to make sure that you don't struggle when you're running Python code. After you've done this installation, all right, Python needs what we call an IDE. In fact, almost every programming language, you need an IDE or an editor to write and test your code. An IDE is what we call integrated development environment. I hope so. Integrated development environment. Yeah. But when you install the Python I've shown you from python.org, you get their default IDE, which is known as IDLE, Integrated Development Learning and Learning Environment. So you get this by default on your system. Let me open it and show you how it looks like. So if you don't know how to program in Python, that's the very first thing you want to go and do to begin programming in Python. Make sure you install Python. By installing it, you get a default IDE, which is called IDLE, as you can see on the screen right now. And you can use that to run your codes. Okay, so with that said, there are other means that we can run the code. We can use to write our Python programs. I'm going to talk a bit about this soon, but then let me talk about the other means. So there are various online compilers with an asterisk, like interpreters, if I should call it, but then it feels easy to call them compilers. But just know that there are online platforms that you can use to program in Python. If you were here during any of our PLDs on C programming, you would have realized that there are two platforms that I keep using, and that is Programmers. So Programmers also has a Python interpreter that you can use. Then Replit. Replit 2, I hope that's it. Replit 2 has so Replit.com also has a Python interpreter that you can use. The advantage of Replit over Programmers is that you can save your codes in here, but you can't save it on Programmers. So if you are doing testing or you want to learn just for practice, you can just go online and search for Programmers Python interpreter. Okay, Programmers Python. Okay, so they call it online compiler. Programmers Python programming online compiler. You can use that to test your codes and use it to learn. Then I mentioned Replit too. So Replit.com, you can go there and use that as well. However, a number of us, if you have ever programmed before, by now you have some advanced text editor installed on your computer. An example of such text editor will be VS Code. We can talk about Sublime Text. You can talk about Atom. So all of these advanced ones can also help you, or you can equally use them to program in Python. So if you have any of these, then don't worry about all of, you can configure them to use to program in Python. The most important thing is that you should have Python installed on your system and added to your environment variables, the path variable. Add the Python to it. Once it is added, you should be able to use VS Code or Sublime or Atom to do that. If you don't have any of these and you're not going to install one of them, the recommended one for Python is PyCharm, even though there is some bit of technicality when it comes to its use. But then that is what most of Python programmers use. So if you don't have any of these, you'd want to look into installing PyCharm for your use. So all of these are available. In fact, the good thing about these ones is the fact that they provide you with the syntax highlighting. So when you're writing code and you make mistake, it's easy for you to pinpoint or spot it out that you've made a mistake. All right, so go with any of them. In the course of this training, I may be using VS Code more because that is what I currently have on my computer and I've been using. But then, aside these ones too, Python is such that you can run it with any terminal. So if you are on Windows, you can use your CMD to run it. If you're on Mac, your terminal can run it, and as well, a bash shell terminal on Linux can equally run that. So we can do that, and with the Python that I installed, I can have some form of a console, like any console at all, and use it to run my code. All right. But now let's zoom into running the code itself. If you want to write Python code and run it, there are two main ways to do that. I hope I'm not speeding. Hi. Let me know. I hope I'm not speeding. Are you able to follow well?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you. So, all right, sure. I'm trying to catch up with the Cohort 7 group. That is why I have to speed up. But then if the essence is for you to get it, if you don't get it, just pause me anywhere, then let me explain further. All right, so there are two main ways that we can run our programs. We have what we call the interactive mode of Python. Interactive mode. Then we have what we call the script mode of Python. Basically, the interactive mode of Python is where you have the whichever tool that you are using showing you the outcome immediately. So you just type it in, hit enter, then you get the output over there. The disadvantage is that it doesn't store the code. Like it keeps it in memory.
Anyone having this challenge, like I can't hear him, and even when I do, it's breaking.
I guess it's service from your end.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Maybe you should change your environment. It's a service from your end.
Okay, so Stella, it looks like it's coming from your end. Kindly check your network, or maybe you want to go off and join. Okay, thank you.
Please, is this session being recorded?
I think the whole thing is echoing.
It's echoing.
Yes.
It's not echoing here. I think it's your network as well.
Okay.
All right.
Please,
now
can you guys hear me?
Yes, Harrison, we can hear you.
Is this session being recorded?
Yes, please. It's being recorded.
Okay, because I have an appointment to catch up with, so maybe I'll have to watch the recording later.
All right, that's fine. Okay, so let's continue. Welcome. I said there are two main ways that we can do that, the interactive mode and the script mode. With the interactive mode, you type your commands or your code onto Python interpreter and it gives you the output. The disadvantage is that it doesn't save it for future use. So within the period where the interpreter is being used, it keeps it in its memory. But the very moment that you close the interpreter or you kill the process that is running, you've lost everything that you typed in there. So the interactive mode is used for practices or testing purposes, okay? So you use this to test your code. If some idea comes, you are writing your Python program and some idea comes, you want to test and see that, hey, this idea of mine, does it work the way I want it to work? Just launch an interactive mode, then use it to test. Once you are done, go back to the script mode. Script mode basically means you are creating a script. A script is just a file that contains programming language in there. All right, so when you create a file, in fact, we can even create a script with a notepad. Just open notepad and type once it is code in a given programming language, that is a script. So for the script mode for Python, it means we are going to open a file, then put the program that we are going to write. We are going to write our script within that file and save it. The advantage is that we save it and we have access to it anytime that we want. But then it doesn't give us the output outright, just as the interactive mode does. So you would have to actively run it to get the output for you to see what is done. But what you should know is that the script mode is what you are going to use when you're building your projects. But then you have the interactive mode to help you test the various things that you are learning, especially now that you are just learning. The interactive mode will help you test them. So let me quickly go back to that IDLE. Yes. So once you've installed Python, I said by default, you have this thing installed. Maximize it. Great. Unfortunately, when I maximize it, I can't really see it well on my screen. So let me do this. Come on. Okay, good. So this, as we see here, Python, this is the interactive mode, sorry. This is the interactive mode. By saying it's interactive, if I use it as a calculator, 2 plus 2, we all know the answer. When I hit enter, it gives me the answer 4. So that is what we mean by it being interactive. Anything I do, 2 minus 5, it's going to give me the answer outright. Okay, so this is interactive and you use it to test your code. If you want to go to the script mode, just go to File, then go to New File. So that will open. Unfortunately, it opened on my other screen. So it opens a new file. Currently, it's untitled. So you would have to save this file, find a location and save the file in there and give it a name. Then you can come here and write your code. You see, here when I hit enter, it goes to the next line. It doesn't give me an output. It is only when I am done and I want to run the program or the script, that is when I'll get the output. So that is the two ways that we can run Python program. So if I'm writing code here and I'm not sure what I'm about to do, want to verify that it works, I come back to the interactive mode and test it here. If I realize that, okay, this is exactly what I'm looking for, I go back to my script mode and continue from there. Any questions on those two?
Okay. Yes. There is something I want to ask. I know it's kind of away from the interactive and script mode, but it's the same thing with script mode. Sure. Okay. These people, the place that we are running currently, the script mode that they used to ask us to push shebang first and all that, is there a must that there must be a shebang? Because I've seen some programs online, some code online, and they don't even use shebang, and sometimes it runs and all that. So I'm just wondering, in their script, is there a must that we use shebang or not? All right. Or why do we use shebang?
All right, I'll answer that your question. Kindly remind me if I don't answer it. I want to talk about the syntax of Python or the syntax of a programming language. Immediately after that, we'll look at our first Python program. Then there I'll answer your question. Okay, so that it makes sense to everyone. All right, sure. So now let's talk about syntax. Any language at all that you are going to learn. Hey, this thing, I'm always spelling it like this. I hope it's correct. Syntax. Hey, I hope it's correct. In any language that you are learning, your focus should be learning the syntax. I mean, now, if this is your first language you are learning, your focus should be learning and understanding the concepts. Okay, you are going to talk about a lot of things, but once you understand the concepts, so if you understand concept from C and you are moving to Python, now what you are going to do is, hey, okay, I know this from C. How do I implement it in Python? So you'll be interested in just the syntax. And by then, that is why I always encourage that beginners, we should always master the concepts. Let our focus be on the concept. After you understand concepts, getting the syntax of a language is easy. Okay, so when we talk about syntax of a language, what are the kind of things that we are looking at? One, we could be looking at the concept of indentation in a language. Indentation, We could talk about the use of parentheses in a language, or curly brackets, those things, brackets, the use of punctuations like commas, that very important one is semicolon. Okay, we can talk about various definitions, how we define terminologies, how we declare. So declarations and definitions. All right. So what it means is that anytime you are switching, now that you are learning programming, anytime that you are switching to a new language, your interest is, okay, in this language, how do we do indentation? Or what's the use of, or how do I use the parentheses? How do I use the comma in this language? Semicolon. How do I declare? How do I define? How do I pass comments? So those are the centers of the language. In fact, if you want to learn a language like English, for instance, you will definitely start learning the use of punctuation marks. You start learning, grammar, the grammar rules. So syntax is basically just rules that guides you when you are writing a particular language. Okay. So when you talk about the syntax of Python programming, we are looking at how do I do this? Like, what are the specific rules? So at the end of the day, when you move to any programming language, what you should be interested in is the rules. And that means it cuts down the time that you are going to spend on learning the whole programming language, because it is the same concept across. It's the same functions that you are going to learn, it's the same objects that you are going to learn, it's the same variables, the same, all those things that we talked about. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say same, but then the basic concept is the same. Okay, so you are just going to learn how to implement them in this language, and those are set of rules that you need to follow. So by knowing the syntax, you'll be able to transport any knowledge, previous knowledge that you have in one programming language to another, just by learning the syntax of that new language. So with Python in particular, indentation is very important. Please pay attention to that. All these things I can't teach you right now because we haven't started writing code. But then I want to draw your attention to that. These are the syntax, so that as soon as we start writing code, start paying attention to them. Okay? Start paying attention to how I use indentations, how I use the parentheses, how I use a comma, a semicolon, how I define things, how I declare things, how I use a comment. Those are the rules that we are going to follow for this particular language. And that is all. Once you get those ones, you are good. And before you get these ones, you need to get the understanding of the concept. All right. So now let's move on and write our first Python code program.
Sorry, Doc. Sorry for interrupting.
All right.
I think it's a colon. Those are 2 dots.
Yes. So in Python too, we have colon, the use of colon. Yes. So I mentioned that. Okay. Yes, that is very important. Colon is an important part of Python. But I mentioned was the punctuation marks. So the use of punctuation marks in programming forms part of the syntax. So at the end of the day, we are going to learn how we use each of these in the program that we are going to write, and where we don't use some and where we use some. Okay. So let me try and switch to my virtual machine. Okay. I think we had a folder on this machine called PLD CD projects. I think we had okay, the PLD was in C programming. So now let me go into Python programming and create a new PLD and create a new make directory, call this Python underscore PLD. All right. Please, I'm going to be doing things. I'm using Visual Studio Code. Permits me to use that because it's easier that way. Okay. So we are going to learn how to write our first Python code. Okay. Hopefully, let's get into this. Our first Python code. So what happens is that anytime anybody learns a programming language, I think by default, the first thing they learn is to write or print hello world. Okay, but then the ideology behind it is that when you start writing code, you want to do something that you can see the results. Okay, so being able to put something on the screen for you to see is a good start. So I would also want to follow suit and quickly write a simple program that will help us output something on the screen. And as I've said earlier, there are two ways to go about it. Either I use the interactive mode or I use the script mode. So now let's start with the interactive mode. To use the interactive mode here, I need to have my terminal up. Okay, so this is my terminal. This is my terminal in VS Code. To get access to the interactive mode, I've already installed, remember, I've already installed Python. If you haven't done that, okay, this is a Linux environment, so then it was installed there, but then I had to update it. And just look around. If you haven't done that, let me type this. In a terminal, when you do Python, so here we are looking at Python 3, then you do -- version. It should give you the version of the Python you have installed. So as you can see, I have Python 3.10.4. Okay, so if you do this on any terminal and you are getting an error, then it means Python is probably not installed on your computer or it hasn't yet been added to your environment path variable. Okay, so kindly pay attention to that. Python 3 -- should give you, then if it is not there, go ahead and install it. Once I know that I have Python installed, I want to launch the interactive mode. I just type Python 3. Just type Python 3 and it will launch the interactive mode. So this is the interactive mode. When you see these three the greater than symbols, then it means you are in your interactive mode. So now what you saw from the IDLG that I opened, if I type 2 + 2 and I hit enter, it gives me an outcome of 4. Okay, so let's write our first Python program. We want to print something, and this is how easy it is to print something on the screen or show something on your screen. Just write the word print in Python, then enclose that print with the parentheses. Very soon we'll learn along the line, we'll learn what this means in itself. But for now, just follow. We'll have this, then we'll bring two quotation marks in there and write whatever we want to print in there. So welcome to Python PLD. Okay. So with this, if you are here and you happen to have programmed in any other programming language, you realize that one of the things that you'll be prompted to do is to put a semicolon at the end, showing that that is the end of a statement. But as I said, when you go to a new language, you have to learn the syntax of that language. The syntax of Python does not allow us to put that semicolon there. So this is a complete statement without the semicolon. I hit enter and it outputs welcome to Python PLD. As simple as that. Okay, so I can go ahead and print anything at all. Hello world, anything that you want. This is the simplest syntax that you are going to have. Print the parentheses, then with quotation marks, and write whatever you want to write in there. Now let me switch to the script mode to show you that. So here I exit this, or you can press Ctrl D to actually get out of it, and create a file here called test1.py. So pay attention to this. Python scripts should be stored with the extension .py. All Python scripts should be stored with the extension .py. So .py, then we go ahead. I can write my code, the same code I wrote there. I said what? Print welcome to Python PLD. That's what I wrote over there. So as simple as this, I can save this. And now let me answer Imel's question. To run this program, there are two ways that you can do that. There are two ways that you can do that. I was going to say something, but let me not say it. So the two ways that you can do that is to, by default, tell your script what it should use to run your program. How do you do that? You can do that by introducing the shebang in front here. So if you are coming from the ALX program, I mean Linus intro into C, you would have seen something similar where you run this, but with Python, the location of the Python file is a bit different. For that matter, you have to make sure you're typing the right location. So you introduce your line of code with this. And basically what this tells your terminal is that to run this, I mean the shell that is going to run the program, to run this, as soon as it enters, the first line is saying that go into user directory, look for the bin directory, and look for a file called Python3. Use that file to run the scripts. That's basically what it's doing over there. Okay, so that is one of the ways when you want to run your program. You just put this there so that the system can automatically run it anytime that you call the file's name or the script's name. If you do this, then you have to make sure that you give the executable permissions to the script. Because if it doesn't have, if you who are going to run it don't have the executable permission, you will not be able to run it. If you don't know anything about Linus and all these things sound strange, don't worry about it. Just know that for the way that I'm going to teach right now, you need to have this line there. Then you need to come into your terminal after saving the line to make the file executable. How do you make it executable? Just write this command chmod then +x. That means that you are changing the mode of this file, this script. You're making it executable. But then you have to make sure that you are in the right location. Currently, I'm not in the right location. So let me move into Python PLD directory. Okay, good. Then I hope you can see this. Okay. And push this up a bit. So to change the mode, I'll chmod +x, then the name of the file. So test1.py, hit enter. By doing this, I have made my file executable. So now I can call this file by its name. And when I call it by its name, essentially what is going to happen is that the shell or the bash or terminal which is going to, or interpreter that is going to interpret whatever commands you are putting here, will know what to use to execute this code. Okay, we've already told it. Go and look for Python3 and use it to execute it. So now I can call it by doing this, showing that in this current directory. That's all that what I've written there means. The dot and the slash. That's what it means, the / dot and / means in the present directory, I'm looking for this file test1.py to run. When I hit enter, it should print welcome to Python PLD. So Imel's question is one of the ways that we can execute the file. Just give the instruction, where do you want me to go and get the file to come and execute this? Okay, then I make sure that it is executable by running the chmod +x with a name. The other way that we can do that is if we don't bring this line, if we don't have this line, let me try. Now I've saved this. Let me try this again and see. Great. So it says that syntax error near unexpected token, this. It doesn't know what you are doing over there. Okay, so the way to go about it when you don't have that line is to write that you want to use Python 3 to open that file. So this is how you run it. You have to tell your shell or your terminal that I want to use Python 3 to open this file. So use it to open. Then now I can go ahead and hit enter and it runs successfully for me. So those are the two ways that you can go about executing or running your Python scripts. Either you put the shebang line there telling your script exactly what to use. And I think it's kind of easier that way. I don't know. So just remember, you'll be using it for long, so you can always have it like that. But then the truth of the matter is that this will only work in a Linux environment. If you move this file onto a Windows environment, it will not work the way you expect it to work. You still need to preface it with the Python 3 for it to work. So if you're working in a Linux environment, you can make do with it. Otherwise, when you want to run your program, you always have to preface or write Python 3 before the name of the file. But once we have that one in there, we can easily call the name of the file. Okay, so that is our first Python program that we have written. Any questions so far? You've written your first program in Python. Any questions? And before I take the questions, let me give this advice. So a lot of us watch tutorials like this and we get the understanding, and that's all we do. Watch tutorials, get understanding, watch tutorials, get understanding. That will not make you a better developer. For you to become a better developer or an engineer, you need to practice. By practicing, I mean, right now you've seen me write a single line of code or 2 lines of code. Make sure you write it. See that you end up getting the same thing. Because you may even just watching me do it, you may end up making mistakes. And by making those mistakes and trying to correct them, that's when you gain the experience. Okay? There is something in programming that we call tutorial hell. You watch tutorials upon tutorials upon tutorials. You move from this tutorial to that tutorial to that. In fact, all the tutorials on Python, you watch all of them, but you're still not good at Python. The only reason is that you're not practicing, okay? So the little things that you learn, like right now, all the things I've shown, using the interactive mode, using this script mode, the 2 ways to execute the script mode, go and test them out. Change things for yourself. This one, change this. Why did I have to bring the parentheses, close it? If I don't close it, you can see some red things. Try running it and see what is the kind of error that it gives you. So the next time when you face that same error, you know what the problem is. Okay, very important. Any questions?
And up, there's a question I have.
Okay.
I can't remember one of them. I wanted to know the difference between that function, those 3 stuff that you mentioned earlier. Function.
Which one?
What's it called? Yeah, the whiteboard.
On the whiteboard?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go back. Go back.
Back.
Yeah. Go back again. Yeah, this functional and procedural. Functional and procedural.
Okay.
Ways
so
of good program Python.
All right. These are just paradigms that the programming language follows. Again, so basically, you can think of procedural programming in this way: that everything that you want to do, you just write the process in that order. So you start from the top to the bottom, write everything. I want this. I want, like, first of all, print this. Find the average of this, divide by this. Just go ahead and write everything. But then we can also have it into different functions that we call the functions to give us the outcome. Then we can also put functions together to form classes, which we then get into object-oriented programming. Okay, so at the end of the day, it depends on the type of language that you are using. If, for instance, when I started learning PHP programming, it was more of procedural programming, that everything that you need, you just write your code raw like that to execute whatever you need. But then there's also where you can put all your things. For instance, when we're doing C, there's no object oriented in C, but then we'll create functions that we use for our programs. Okay, so those are just paradigms, or let me say ideologies, that your programming language can follow. But then with Python, the most important is the object oriented. So we'll get to it later.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. Now I want to talk about this feedback from someone. Grace, I think it's coming from your end.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know.
Okay. All right. Yes, it's gone. Thank you. So let's see this. The next thing I want to talk about is variables in Python. So we've started Python. Okay, we've started. Everything is going to make sense, but then I have to take it one after the other for you to understand. Okay, we are going to be doing a lot of things in Python, moving here and there, but we need containers to store data or values for us. So Grace, I think it's back again. Kindly try and mute yourself, unless you want to ask a question again. So let's discuss what variables are. This variables is an English word. It comes from the word varies. Okay, so essentially when we talk about a variable, we are looking at a container. Oh, I remember those times in school, we used to draw a box like this. Yes. So this is a container to contain some values. Okay, this Salem. Please kindly only unmute when you have a question, otherwise you distract us. Okay. All right. So the variables are just containers that you use to contain something. For instance, if you are going to write a program that does a lot of calculation, maybe I want to convert your age into seconds. Okay. So you tell me your date of birth, then I'll be able to calculate your age, then your age in seconds. Okay. And then inside the program, I'm going to be using all these details somewhere else in the program. I can't be rewriting the same things all the time. Like, okay, my date of birth is, today's date is what? 14. So my date of birth is 14th this. And everywhere in my program, I have to keep repeating this thing. Everywhere in my program, I have to keep repeating this thing. You know, if you happen to write a program where you use this date of birth, like say 20 times in there, then you later realize that, oh, you made a mistake. The date of birth is actually not 2022, but rather 19 something. Okay, let's assume 1999. 1999. So you now have to go line by line inside your program and go and change each of them, which is a bit tedious. So one of the ways that we do that is we use containers to store them and give the containers labels that we can easily call anytime that we want. Hope that makes sense. So what I will do is, in Python, it's very easy to create a variable. That means it's very easy to put your data or your value within a container and anywhere you go, just carry the container there. So what I'm saying here is that instead of writing this everywhere I go, the first thing is that I'll pass this date of birth to a variable, and in this case, I'll call my variable DOB. Okay, so in Python, if you want to create a variable, it's as simple as this. Have your variable name, then say assign it to. Remember, in programming, when you see an equal to sign, it's different from the mathematics equal to sign. This is known as assignment sign or symbol, the assignment symbol. And all that it means that whatever we write here is being assigned to, okay, is being assigned to this. What it means is that anywhere in my program, when I write DOB, it is just a label for this one. So I don't want to keep writing this whole thing. Therefore, I'll just write DOB. Does that make sense? It's just like when you use nicknames. Your own name is very difficult for people to pronounce. So you decided to use a nickname. So let's say somebody that is called, what name will I use? Or I should use my own name. Okay. So let me say, a lot of people cannot pronounce my surname. Okay. So I decided that from now onwards, since you cannot pronounce my surname, just call me EO. So this is what I'll do, EO. So that instead of writing the whole name or trying to pronounce the whole name that you cannot pronounce, all you need to remember is EO. So in your program, anywhere that you want to write Ehoneah Obed, you put EO. Then the interesting thing is that if you happen to have used EO 1,000 times in your program, but then you realize that when you were spelling, you actually made a mistake. In fact, a lot of people spell my name by using A like this, and that is wrong. So let's assume that you found out that you made a mistake while spelling the name. Now your trouble is not to come to each of them and come and update each of them, but then just this single line where you did the assignment, just update that single line, and after updating that line, every other part of your code now has the right spelling. As simple as that. So let me just go back to the previous one I did. Without the variable, you kept writing the value by yourself inside your program multiple times. So if you find out that you made a mistake somewhere, you have to go through the code. Imagine like you built a big software and it has thousands of codes, and you happen to have used this variable, this value thousands of times. You have to go to each of them and go update them. That's not a good thing. So it is best that we use these variables. So essentially, a variable is just a container that we use to contain values. Okay, those values can change. As you saw, initially it was spelled with an A in here, then eventually we came to change it. All right, variables can be operated on. So for instance, let's say that I said age is the variable that I want, and I've asked you for your age. You told me that you are 20 years old. Okay, if my program is supposed to be a program that is running forever and each year is supposed to be able to update itself, then this year if you are 20, next year age will now have to become 21. So a variable contains, this is just a container for your age. So anywhere I want your current age, I'll call age. But then next year, your age may have changed to 21. I don't need to know the actual value because anytime I call age, it will give me the most recent value that you have given it. Okay, so that is what variables basically are. And they are going to help us do a lot of things, as you will see soon. Okay, now I believe that you understand the concept of variables, but then how do we name variables in Python? So we keep talking about the syntax of Python, and that is what I need you to pay attention to, especially those of you who have done C programming or have done any sort of programming before. You need to pay attention to the difference in the syntax to help you adjust accordingly. So with Python programming, there are names that you can use, and there are rules that will govern how you give a name to a variable. So one of the rules is that your variable should be made up of what we'll call letters or characters. No, let me be specific. So letters, that is, we are looking at the alphabet, okay? The alphabet that you and I know. Then we can look at numbers. They can also contain numbers. Then they can contain underscores. So these are like the three major things that your variable names can contain. The letters can be uppercase or lowercase, okay? Either of the cases are allowed. But then the exception is that you can't begin a variable name with a number. Python will frown on it. It doesn't like that. Don't start me with a number. So you can't start a variable name by calling it, say, 28. No, it's not acceptable. But we can have age like this. We can have age like this. We can have underscore age. But this is not acceptable. Okay? This is acceptable, this is acceptable, this is acceptable. With that mentioned, I want to draw your attention to another syntax that you need to pay attention to, or rule that you need to pay attention to in Python. And that rule is that this and this are not the same. So when we have variable named age and a variable named age, they are not the same. The reason why they are not the same is that Python is case sensitive. So if you're coming from a different programming background, it's not every language that is case sensitive. Some are, some are not. So if now you are in Python, so remember this, that Python is case sensitive. For that matter, age is not the same as age. Nowhere. Okay, that's it. Let's go on with our variable names. With the variable names as well, you can use special characters in your variable naming, special characters. So in fact, it's only the underscore that is allowed. You can use something like this, that, and any other special character. You can use it in naming a variable. Okay, and these rules that I've given actually do not only apply to naming variables, but in general, we call them identifiers. So we are going to be, in later lessons, we are going to be learning about what we call functions, methods, and many other things, properties, attributes, and things. But then anywhere that you are going to give a name, like a class, a method, a function, all those ones, you are going to give names to them. Anywhere you are going to give a name, they follow these same rules that I've given you. Okay, so the identifiers that we use in Python must follow this rule. You're either having a character, let me use an alphabet. So you have an alphabet or a number or underscore, but it shouldn't begin with a number. And you can't have any of these special, you can't have those special characters in there, apart from an underscore. Then it is case sensitive. So one with a capital A and the other with a small letter a are not the same. Very important. The last but not the least, which is very important for you to know, is that there are some words in Python, in fact, in any programming language at all, there are those words. We call them keywords or reserved keywords. So those ones are reserved for the use of the program itself. The program has special meanings for them. For that matter, you can use those ones in your own program. So if I tell you that, for instance, this none is a reserved keyword in Python, this means that when you are naming your variables, there is no way that you are allowed to write a variable name as none is equal to something. No, you are not allowed to do that because none is a reserved keyword. So there are quite a number of these keywords, and as you keep practicing, you will get to know the various keywords. In fact, I don't think it's something you should memorize, but then as you keep writing code in Python, you get used to the keywords. There is a simple way to find the keywords. Probably. If you don't understand anything from what I'm going to be doing right now, don't worry. It is not meant for you to understand right now. It is meant for you to get the concept. Okay, so let me clear my screen. I want to show you a list of the keywords. Okay. Python 3 to get into interactive mode. Then write something here which you don't need to understand for now. Then I would print something. Let me print keyword list. Hopefully I haven't forgotten. Okay, so these are the keywords in Python. I hope you can see them. This is false, none, true, and ask. So essentially, these are the words that you can use on your own as a variable name. You can't use any of these as a variable name. Please pay attention to it. But then the important thing is that Python is case sensitive. So even though global is a keyword that I can use global with a capital G because this global is with a small letter G. But if I were you, I'll try to avoid them in any way possible. Whether I'm changing the case or not, I'll try to avoid them any way possible. Okay, so that was just to show you a list of the keywords. So almost every interpreter that you are going to use, you can get access to a list of the keywords just by doing these two lines. Okay, just these two lines. That's what I used. Import keyword, then print keyword list. That's all. We'll give you a list of the keywords, but it's not so important right now. Just know that there are special or reserved keywords that you can't use when you're writing your own variables or identifiers. And remember that they are case sensitive. So if I write this, it's not the same as that. Okay. Great. One more thing. Let's talk about comments. So we are trying to get the basis of Python programming so that as soon as we start writing our programs in Python, we understand everything that's happening there. Comments, let's talk about comments and literals. Comments basically are the part of the code that you write for your own sake and for the sake of other humans who will be reading or consuming the code that you have written. So you don't write a comment for the interpreter. It doesn't use it for anything. As soon as it realizes that there is a comment, it's going to jump over it. The comment is only for your use and the use of every other human being that will have access to your code. Today, you may not find a reason to write comment because you think that it's going to waste your time. But the reality is that the code that you write today, you may come back to it 6 months' time and you don't remember why you wrote that code. So it is a good practice to put comments in your codes. Essentially, what comment is doing is you are giving yourself like an idea or any other person, a third party, who will come and review your code or come and use your code to know exactly what that code, block of code that you have written is about. All right. And comments are written in several ways depending on the programming language that you are using. So if you're coming from another programming language to Python, you find that there's a bit of a difference. In Python, we use the hash symbol to indicate a comment. So far as you preface a line with the hash symbol or anywhere hash is seen, the program, every other thing after that line is considered as a comment. So it's not going to be treated. Okay, so there are two major uses, even though I've said one, which is you use the comment so that it's for the humans, you, the individual, it prompts you, why did you write this code? All right, but there's another use of comments. That is when you are testing your code. Sometimes there is a bug in the code or the code has a problem somewhere. You are yet to identify where the problem is. So what you do is that you comment out some part of the code. Once you've commented out some part of the code, it means that it's not going to run. Okay, so do I go back to, let me try using the interactive. All right, when we are here and I do print as we had initially, let me say, hey, that's all I want to print. Nope. Okay, when I do this and I print, it prints hey. But if I put this in front of it and I do print, then say hey, let's see what is going to print for us. Okay, hit enter and nothing happens. So why does nothing happen? This is because you can even infer from the color coding here. This is all red, okay, but this wasn't all red. So this, nothing happened in this case because we preface it with a hash sign, and the interpreter understands that to be a comment. So he knows that, hey, this is not for me, so I'm not going to run it. That means that when you're writing your code and you're debugging, you want to see if there's a portion of your code that could probably be causing the problem. You just comment it out. You comment that part out and run your code to see if you get the output that you're looking for. Then gradually uncomment them to get back to the root of the cause of the problem. Okay, so that is one way. The other, I mean, that's one reason to use comment. The other reason to use comment is to give information on why or what this block of code is for. So what I'm about to write, what does it do? Okay, believe me that there are times that you come back to your code and you don't remember what that code did, and in fact you need it. Like you've built a software and all of a sudden the software is misbehaving and you need to go and do some corrections. You later found a bug when the software was in production, that you shipped the software, people are already using it. Let's assume that you created an accounting software and you didn't check it very well. I mean, there is some bug somewhere you didn't realize. One person finally found that because of that, they lost a lot of money and they are going to sue you. You go back to your software, the source code, and they look like Greek to you. See how when you are learning a new language, it looks like Greek to you. That's how you come back and you see code that you wrote yourself and it still looks Greek to you. So to help you out, you write these comments so that at the end of the day, when you come back to it, you know exactly why those things were there. Especially if you're a beginner, I highly recommend the use of comments. Okay, any questions so far? So there are no questions. Let me go on. We've talked about using the hash for commenting. There is another symbol that we can use in Python for commenting, even though it may have some special meaning. That is the triple quotation sign. Okay, so when you introduce the triple quotation sign, anything you write in between is also considered as a comment, but specifically it is known as the docstring string. Okay, and what is used for is used to create some form of documentation. Already I've said that the comment is for you to give some form of documentation for others or yourself when you come back to your code to understand what is happening. So when we start talking about object-oriented programming, you're creating classes, you're creating methods, you're creating models and things. You have to write the docstring, that is, write comments that explain what your class or your method or whatever it is does, so that anytime you pick that script, you know exactly what each of them is doing in there. Okay, then once I've talked about the essence of commenting, let me be quick to add that when you are naming variables or any form of identifiers, okay, make sure that the names that you choose are reasonable enough. Reasonable in the sense that they should be like self-contained. So for instance, if I want to store your age in a variable and I go and write n1 is equal to what is your age, say 20 years. Then I store another person's n2 is equal to 30. 5 years from now, when I come back to my code, will I remember that this was the age that I collected and stored in this variable? No. So in this case, I'll probably have to write a comment to explain that these are ages that I am storing in these variables. But then to avoid all of those things, we can use reasonable or meaningful names. So instead of writing N1, I'll write age 1 is equal to 20. Age 2 is equal to 30. So that just by the look of this name, I know that this is age that I have stored. And this is also age that I have stored. So in as much as you are going to be creating variables, try to make the names of the variables sensible, if I say, right, or relatable by just looking at the variable, so that you don't get to use a lot of comments. In fact, not just variables, every other identifier that we'll talk about, that's the function names, the method names, the class names, let it be relatable, things that you can easily realize that, okay, then this is what they are trying to do. But then there's also a balance, because sometimes you want to write and you end up writing a very long variable name, which is also not recommended. That this variable is for storing age. When somebody reads that, they know that, oh, okay, so this variable is for storing age, and that was the name that you gave it. It makes sense. But then it's too long, and you can easily make a mistake just typing it. And remember, one of the reasons why we use variables is because we can't always remember the values that we stored in there. So we want to make it simple to get those values anytime you want it. So even though I'm saying and recommending that your identifier should be meaningful, they shouldn't be that long. Okay, they should just be meaningful. Like, try and get the balance in there. But then I realized that with practice, you tend to get better, and everybody ends up adopting their own style. So stick to the style that works best for you. But one other important thing is that there are some characters that when you are using in naming your variables or identifiers, you have to be extremely careful, because they can be confused for other things. One example is using an O or a 0. So if you end up calling, let's say, just O as the name of your variable, and say O is equal to that, maybe I was looking at my name and I'm representing it with O. Somebody may confuse this for a 0. Okay, and depending on the font that they are using on their computer, this may be very confusing. So you want to be careful when you are using things like that. And capital I as well can easily be confused for an L. So when you start using, in Python, we have what we call the, not in Python, like in programming in general, we have, how do you call those tools? Like, forgotten the general name, but then there are tools that we use to check the style to ensure that they follow a particular standard. So those of you coming from ALX C programming background, you remember Betty for checking your styles and documentations in C. But in Python, we have one called PyCoStar. I hope that's it. Usually I use the tab to autocomplete. Anyway, I think that's it. So PyCoStar. Oh, cohort 7 members, you can help me out. That's it.
Code.
Code. Okay.
Code.
You know, when I'm typing, okay, thank you. When I'm typing, I just type code and I hit the tab key to autocomplete it. So anyway, thank you. So code style. All right, you use it to check the style of the code. And when you start using these ones, it will sometimes prompt you when you use something like capital I as an identifier. It will tell you that your code, your identifier, this thing is confusing. So you probably have to change it. Okay. So let's pay attention to that. And for those of you who don't know the essence of these things, let me just say it here once and for all, that depending on where you are working at, okay, they have, various companies have their own programming style that they'll teach you when you go there, so that the codes that you write has to conform to that style. All right. So now that you are learning, it's good to learn with style so that eventually when you move somewhere and they have their own style, it's not every company that uses a coding style. I mean, but if you find yourself somewhere where they expect you to code in a particular style, then you don't struggle with it. Also, it helps you write neat code. These ones have been like standard that people have agreed upon. Even not everyone agrees to that, but then they are generally acceptable standards so that when you follow, your codes looks presentable. Okay, enough about comments. Now let's talk about literals. We've talked about variables. Have a long way to go. Let's talk about literals. Literals, I think literal is an English word where people usually say literally, the literal meaning of this. So basically, when we talk about literals in programming, you're referring to the data, the raw data itself. So if I come and I write my name as such, okay, like this is a literal, as you can see. But what type of data? So there are different types of data that we should be talking about. There are different types.
Waiting to happen now.
I was thinking it's only me. I think it's network.
I think he has network problems. Should be network problems.
It's network.
Yeah. Mr. Emmanuel Priest, it feels good connecting with you, Ehoneah.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good day, too.
Goodness gracious goodness. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can hear you.
So sorry.
I was thinking village people has come.
My network has gone off. I don't know why. So I've switched to my mobile network. But hopefully we'll finish soon. I have like 2 or 3 things to talk about and we'll finish for today. We've already done almost 1 hour, 30 minutes. Okay, so strings are data types that we can look at, and basically strings are just a collection of characters. Okay, remember I didn't say alphabet, I said characters. So it could be an underscore. This special character can be part any of the alphabets, numeric values, anything at all that you can type, anything that you can type on your computer can be considered a string. And in fact, even the language doesn't matter, whatever language. In Python in particular, for you to have a string, you just have to enclose it with the quotation marks. So whether the double quotation marks or the single quotation marks, once you put something inside this, you consider it as a string. Always remember that. So if I do this and write Ehoneah, that is a string. Okay, so this, the string that you are seeing here, Ehoneah, you can call it a string literal. That's like literally what you are seeing. That is it. Okay, there is a data type called int, a whole number without any fractional part, without any decimal part. So I can write an integer. An example of integer would be 4. Okay, so I can create a variable x and assign it to 4. The 4 itself is known as a literal. That's an integer literal. These are terminologies that you use frequently or you hear frequently. So if you don't understand them, it may end up confusing you. This x here is a variable, but the 4 here is an integer literal. Okay, I can say y is equal to Obed. So y here is a variable, but then Obed is what? A string literal. In other programming languages, before you create a variable, I should have even said this earlier, you need to tell your program the type of data. Then in Python, it's not necessary. The interpreter would try and identify the type itself. So y is equal to this. The data type here is a string. You don't need to tell your interpreter that you are going to pass a string to y. No. Find out what y is. The nice thing about Python is that now that I've assigned Obed to y, I can go ahead and even reassign something else and say 4. So initially, y was containing a string, but now y is containing an integer. It is allowed in writing code. All of these things will make sense. Why is my network doing that? Okay, let's go on. So the other data types that we can talk about, one common one that I have to mention before I move on is a float. A float basically is a number with a decimal part or a fractional part. So if I have 4.0, once I've written 0.0, this would be considered as a float. Okay, once there is a decimal point somewhere, it will be considered as a float. Just keep that in mind. If you write a number without any decimal part, it's considered as an integer. But if there is a decimal part, it's considered as a float. So basically, if I write 4.0 anywhere, you can consider it as a float literal. This would be an integer literal. As simple as that. So those are the things about literals that I want to bring to your attention. The last thing I want to talk about right now is operators. There are quite a number of them. But then before I do, let me take a short break here. If there are any questions so far, let's answer those questions. If you have any questions at all for me, or for all of us, in fact. Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, let's continue. So there are quite a number of operators, different types. We have what you are used to already, the arithmetic operators. Okay. We have logical operators. We have, where is my pen? Okay. There is, okay, the assignment operators. Then there is the comparison operators as well. Comparison, which one is which? Is it double S? 1S, comparison operators. Then, okay, so at least now we can take a look at just these ones. There is the bitwise operators as well, but let's take a look at these ones. The arithmetic operators are operators that you're already aware of. You can talk about addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. But in Python, there is an additional one that you might not have seen in any other language. Okay, personally, I've not seen in any other language that I know. It's only in Python that I found it. It's what we call the integer division or the floor division. So let me write it out. When you use 2 forward slashes, it's called the integer division or the floor division. If you have ever learned about floor and ceiling in mathematics, you would probably be able to guess what this does. Okay, but for now, we all know what plus or addition symbol does. Minus, we know what it does. Multiplication, then the normal division. Okay, one thing you should know is that in Python, anytime you use this division symbol, it returns a float. Anytime you use this division, it's going to print out something dot something. So even if you do 1 divided by 1, you are going to get 1.0. Okay, that's what's noting. The division symbol will always return a float. There is also the modulo symbol. The modulo symbol, I think that one is pretty much available in almost every programming language. But then in normal mathematics, we don't use this symbol in normal mathematics, but there is modulo in mathematics as well. Basically, what modulo does is it gives us the remainder, okay, the remainder of division. So if you do, say, 5 divided by 4, but then you are using the modulo sign, what's going to happen is that it's going to find 5 divided by 4 is what? 1, remainder 1. So it's going to return 1, which is the remainder. That means that if it was 6 modulo 4, it's going to return 2 as the remainder. So that's what the modulo does. With floor division or integer division, what happens is that it is some sort of division, but at the end of the day, it gives like the smallest integer. Would that be the right explanation? The smallest integer. So let me give an example, say 5 or 15 floor division 4. So let's do normal division. What would this be? If it is normal division, 15 divided by 4. Yes, mathematicians amongst us, what will it be? We have 3 remainder. Yes, 3 remainder
3.
Okay, so 3 remainder 3. If we use just 15 divided by 4, the answer will be 3. Okay, if we use 15 modulo 4, the answer will be this 3, not this one. That will be the remainder. All right, good. But then with the floor division 2, this will be 3. It will be 3, but I think that's not the best example to use. Let me use one that's 5 divided by 2. Okay, let's call the answer in decimal. Okay, so 5 divided by 2 will be what? Is it 2.5? Right? 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. Great. Yeah. So with a floor division, it's going to round this not to the nearest highest. I mean, so ideally you would want to round it to what? 3. But then with floor division, it rounds it to the lowest integer. It always rounds it to the lowest integer. So this is going to give us 2. I hope it makes sense. It's floor. There is 2 things. We have floor and ceiling. Okay, in mathematics. When you talk about floor, we are looking at. Hi, Debbie. Okay. When you talk about floor, you know your floor, then you know your ceiling. Okay. So anytime you are looking at ceiling, you're rounding up floor, you are going down. It's the floor. The floor is down there. Okay. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So that is for the arithmetic operators. The logical operators that you are going to be seeing in Python, commonly you find AND, or in some programming languages, you are allowed to do this, but you are not allowed to do it. These are not the same. Why? Anyone to help me? Why do I say that this and this are not the same?
Python is case sensitive, that's why.
Thank you very much. It's case sensitive. So as we said earlier, this is not the same as this. So we are saying that the AND operator in Python is written this way. Please and please write it this way. The OR operator is written this way. Then we also have the NOT operator. So this one is logic. Okay, we are trying to do something the same, or this and this, or this or that, not this. Okay, so we are going to be using them in our programs, and you get to see them. For now, I'm just introducing you to those operators. The next set of operators, let's talk about the comparison operators. Comparison operators, those you've been using in your normal mathematics: less than, greater than, what's greater than, equal to, less than, equal to. These ones are the ones that you use to compare things. Okay, so you can say if 2 is less than 5, or you want to check if, in fact, they should be equal. So this is also what's noting, that equal to symbol in programming is written as a double equal to sign. Okay, so this is when you can say we are dealing with equality. Equality means that we are checking if the things on both sides of this operator are the same. If you use just one, it is assignment. And that is one mistake that beginner programmers always make. So please pay attention to that. Anytime you want to compare two things, sometimes you know these things, but when you're writing, you make a mistake. So when you're debugging your code, always pay attention to the use of equal to signs. So I want to see if 3 is equal to 3. Okay, so we can put all of these things that I'm writing, we can easily put them in the interactive mode of the IDLE, then check them. If you do this, you're going to end up getting true, because 3 is equal to 3. 2 is less than 5. That will also end up giving us true. So these are what we call comparison operators. And when we start looking at the flow control of programs, okay, conditionals, these ones will come in handy where we have to make decisions based on certain things. Then using the comparison operators become very important. The last set of operators that we talk about is the assignment operators. The assignment operators. So with assignments, I've already spoken about the single equal to sign, which is like the assignment sign. So you want to check if, no, you want to assign something to something. Let's say if I say age is equal to 20, all that I've done here is that I've assigned 20 to age. So anywhere you see age, it points to the value 20. So age is a reference to 20, like the way you use your nicknames, as simple as that. But then there are other assignment operators that we can use, and it's just basically a combination of operators, other operators with the assignment operators. So you may end up seeing age is equal to 20. Okay, so here it is an assignment operator, but the truth of the matter is that there are two operators that have been combined here. Two separate operations are taking place right now. And what is happening is that in reality, this is age is equal to age plus 20. So kindly pay attention to that. That what we do with this type of assignment operator is basically we need the age here. So there is an old value. We need to add 20 to it. Then now reassign the outcome to age. So already the age was, let's say, 20 initially. And now when we write this, we are adding an extra 20 to it. So if I go ahead and find age now has become 40 because we have added an extra 20 to it. But then this is the shortcut. So in simple terms, what I'm saying is that instead of writing, anytime you have a variable that is repeating itself to be operated upon, you can abstract it in that way. So instead of doing age plus 20, you can write it as age plus equal to 20. So anytime you see something of this nature, all that is saying is that age is equal to age plus 20. In the same way, we can have age minus equal to 10. And what this means is that age is equal to age minus 10. In the same way, we can have age times equal to 2. And what this means is that age is equal to age times 2. There is one operator that I've left out so far, and that is, okay, not respect to this. So let me finish this one. I think under the comparison operator, I talked about not equal to operator. So this, for the equal to sign, says not equal to. So if you check, is 2 not equal to 3? And that is true. 2 is not equal to 3. So sometimes you need to check if there is an equality or not. And this is one of the ways that you can do that. So the last operator that I want to bring to your attention in Python is this operator. This is known as the exponentiation operator or exponent. Okay, the exponent operator. That is, if I write 2 asterisk asterisk 2, what it means in reality is that I'm looking for 2 power 2. But in Python, this is how you present it. Any questions so far? So these ones, we can also have modulo equal to, division equal to, floor division equal to, okay? And they all have similar meanings as I've explained. Any questions here? Otherwise, I would want to conclude on our first session so that in the next session we can do more. All right. Yeah, so I think this will be a good point to conclude for today's session. If you have any questions, let's answer it before we end the session. Then in our next session, the time will be announced soon in the group. We'll continue and start looking at more relevant coding, Python coding. Yes, were you about to ask something?
So, yeah, good day, Doc.
Good day.
So literally, the exponentiation does the same thing as the POW function in C.
Function. Yes, please.
Oh, and also I see that a lot of
Python,
a lot of the ground breaks for Python are also it's a bit similar with that of C. Yeah, that's what I want to.
Okay. So Python is actually, the implementation of Python is actually from C. Yes, there's a lot of abstractions. Like, they've hidden a lot of things so that you don't have to worry yourself about it. But then it makes programming in Python easier, and that's what makes it a higher level programming. Anyway, yes. Any other questions? All right. So if there are no questions, thank you all for joining. And now that we've started, we hope to sorry. Oh. Okay, so we hope to have more of such sessions. Was someone asking a question? Otherwise, say bye-bye.
Yes. I was asking to
Okay, so sorry.
Okay, my question is actually as regards installing Python on my virtual machine, because I've tried using app-get Python, but what I'm getting is not Python, because whenever I type this Python version, it's not showing up anything. So I'd like you to advise on that. Thank you.
Okay. So with the Ubuntu, I mean with the various Linux distros, sometimes it depends on the distro that you are using. Okay, there is a documentation in regards to how to go about it. So I can't really say it off head right now, but then by default, it should usually be installed there. Otherwise, you come to this site and click on Linux. The site is able to automatically pick the distro or the OS that you are using and gives you like the recommended one to use. So try it. If it doesn't work, just reach out to me and we'll see how to go around.
Okay. Though I have it installed on my Windows, it's working perfectly well.
Oh, okay.
I'm just trying to install it on my virtual machine. So
Which
I'll get back.
which OS do you use on the virtual machine?
Ubuntu 20.04.
Okay. All right. So you try what I've said, then whatever happened, let me know.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome. Okay. Thank you all for joining. I appreciate your time so much. And so we meet again. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Doc.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.